Today we are beginning our fractions unit. Please copy down the standard benchmark indicator on a clean page in your math notebook. The student will identify representations of fractions and describe orally and in writing the equivalence relationships among fractions. Understanding fractions. Fractions are used to show part of a set. The fraction of the shapes that are stars can be written as 3 stars out of the total number of shapes. So if we look at that group of shapes there were 3 stars, 4 moons, so a total of 7 shapes. So the fraction of the shapes that are stars is 3/7. So it's the part over the whole in the fraction. You can also show fractions to show part of a whole on a number line, as shown to the right here. They divided the number line into 4 equal sections, so we know we're working with fourths. The fraction for the shaded section can be written as 3/4 because 3 of the 4 sections are shaded in. Number 1. The number of shaded parts is 4, and what is the total number of parts? So if you look at our square up there, we can count. We have 3 rows of 3, so we have 9 total parts. So our shaded fraction is 4/9. For number 2, we need to count the number of shaded circles first, so we can tell that we have 5 shaded circles. Then, as we count, the total number of circles is 11. So our complete fraction is 5/11. For number 3, we have a number line, so we need to figure out how many sections the number line is divided into between 0 and 1. And as we count, we can see there are 8 sections, 7 of which are shaded. So our fraction is 7/8. For number 4, it's the same thing. We count the number of sections between 0 and 1. In this case, it's 10. And we can see there are 4 sections shaded in. So we get 4/10. We're not going to worry about simplifying it right here. The next piece we're going to do after this page is looking at simplifying fractions, so we'll talk about it then. For 5, we have to draw a set and shade 2/5. So what you need to do is pick a shape. I'm going to use a square, but you can pick any shape you want. You need to draw 5 of them and shade 2 of them in. Thus demonstrating the fraction 2/5. For 6, we're going to draw a hole and shade it 3/4. So we can draw a shape. We're going to use a square here and divide it into 4 sections. The sections need to be as equal as you can, but it's okay if they're not exact since we're drawing it. Then we need to shade in 3/4 of the square. So we're going to shade in 3 of the sections. For 7, number sense, if you shade 1/3 of a set, what fraction of the set is not shaded? Since the whole set is always referred to as 1, if 1 out of 3 of it's shaded, that means 2/3 of it is not. And we can know this makes sense. We can check our work by adding 1/3 plus 2/3 equals 3/3, which equals 1 whole. For fractions in lowest terms, equivalent fractions are 2 fractions that name the same amount. You can find equivalent fractions by multiplying or dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same non-zero number. This is the same as multiplying or dividing that fraction by 1. So, in example 1, find 2 fractions that are equivalent to 5/10. So if we look here, they take the numerator and the denominator, and they multiply both by 2. Whatever you do to one part of a fraction, you have to do the same thing to the other. That's what keeps it equal or equivalent. So they multiply the top and the bottom by 2, so we get 10/20, which is equivalent to 5/10. You can also find equivalent fractions by dividing. So for the second example, they did 5 divided by 5 and 10 divided by 5, which got it down to 1/2. So our new numerator is 1, our new denominator is 2. 1/2, 5/10, and 10/20 are all equivalent fractions. For A and B, they want us to pick a number and multiply. So we're going to pick a number, we're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. We're going to use 2. So in the first one on A, I want you to fill in those first two boxes 2 and 2. So now we have 2 times 2 and 6 times 2. So we're going to multiply across and we get 4 and 12. Which means 4/12 is equivalent to 2/6. For B, we have 4/5 and we want to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So we're going to use 3 this time. Then 4 times 3 becomes 12, and 5 times 3 becomes 15. That means 12/15 is equivalent to 4/5. For C and D, they want us to divide to find an equivalent fraction. So for 6/8, we need to find a number that will divide evenly into both 6 and 8. And we know 2 is a good number to use. So we're going to put the 2 in those first two boxes right after the division symbol. Then 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. That means 6/8 and 3/4 are equivalent fractions. For D, we have 3/12, and they want us to divide to find an equivalent fraction. So we know that 3 will divide evenly into 3 and 12. Then 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. That means 3/12 and 1/4 are equivalent fractions. Example 2. A fraction is in lowest terms when no whole number can be divided evenly into both the numerator and the denominator. A fraction in lowest terms is equivalent to the original fraction. So for example, we need to write 8/24 in lowest terms. So we're going to divide the numerator and the denominator by a common factor. In this case, they chose 2. So they divided 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. It's still not in lowest terms. So then they continue dividing to see if there are still common factors. They know they can divide by 4 in both the numerator and the denominator. So they divide it by 4 on both, and we get 1/3. So now the fraction is in lowest terms. 8/24 is equal or equivalent to 1/3. To simplify this, to make it easier for you, if you figure out what the greatest common factor between the numerator and the denominator are, then you can divide by that, and you only have to do your division once. If you're stuck and you can't figure out what that greatest common factor is, just keep dividing by the numbers that do work until you get to the lowest form where you can't divide any lower. All right, for E through G, they want us to write each fraction in lowest terms. So first we have 4/10. If we look at 4 and 10, we know 2 divides evenly into both, so we're going to divide by 2. Always make sure you write out the number you're dividing by so that you're showing all of your work. For F, we have 15 divided by 60. Now, the easiest way to do this is to figure out what the greatest common factor is. We know 15 has factors of 1, 3, and 5, and 15, all of which divide into 60. So 15 is actually your greatest common factor. So if you divide by 15, we only have to divide once. So in this case, 15 divided by 15 gets us 1, and 60 divided by 15 gets us 4. So we get 1/4 as our simplest or lowest terms. Finally, for G, we have 8 and 28. So we know the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. We know that 8 doesn't divide into 28, but we know that 4 does. So we're going to divide the numerator and the denominator both by 4. So we get, in simplest or lowest terms, 2/7. Please make sure you have all the work copied down and glue this page in your math notebook.